Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 130.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, and welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I am your host, Jay Massey, and guess what we are going to talk about today? We're going to talk about entrepreneurship in a completely different fashion than we have ever done, and that's exactly why I'm excited. We have the ability to create cash flow in so many different ways, and yet there are so many times that we wonder, how is that going to ever happen for me? And we get stuck. And maybe some of you are stuck in thinking that the only way to do cash flow is with real estate. I clearly want to go on record and say again, real estate is just one of many ways. It's not the only way. It's the way that I found first. And you know what? It does work for a number of people, but for some of you, it probably doesn't at all. And you are hoping that you could figure out a way to get your idea off the ground. And I think today's guest is going to absolutely help you with that, because we have Michael O'Donnell. He's the Executive Director of Office of Innovations and Entrepreneurship at the University of Central Florida and the Director of UCF's Venture Accelerator. Now, that's a long way of saying it, and I love the title he gives himself. He calls himself a Pracademic, because we've all had instructors who don't necessarily practice what they teach. And yet here, we found one somewhere that's out there helping students figure out how to get their businesses started, get them off the ground, specializing in the Central Florida area. And that's what I'm excited about, is everything that he knows, everything that he's done, because he has participated in business coaching, program development, all aspects of business commercialization, trade missions, speaks on entrepreneurship topics, and formed the Florida Angel Nexus, an organization with a mission to provide funding and advising for select statewide emerging growth businesses. Let me translate that for you. That's called, we're looking to fund quality businesses, and maybe one of you entrepreneurs has a great idea, so come and talk to us. You say, where's the money? I'm telling you, it's out there, and most importantly, here's one of the individuals who could help you figure out why you may not be getting it. Help me welcome Mr. Michael O'Donnell. Mike?
Hello, Jay. Pleasure to be here.
How are you, sir?
Doing good.
Excellent, excellent. So many may not know, but we met at the that retirement plan with what was the name of that? Do you remember?
New View IRA.
New View. That's what it was. And I was like, why am I Glenn? Because I could remember Glenn, but I couldn't remember New View. And exactly. And that we were out there in Florida, and you were there. It was just refreshing for me to actually meet someone in a university setting who actually practiced what they taught. How on earth did that ever happen?
Well, let me just correct a couple of things. Number one, it isn't I practiced like in past tense.
Oh, my bad. That's right.
Currently, I'm part of 6 different startup companies that I'm an investor in, and they're underway here in the state of Florida. So I continue to do that. You know, if you're a PhD, your job is to do research to keep your skills current. But as a Pracademic, the way I do research is I continue to help people start new businesses.
I love that. It's like the experimentation process. Let's just go do something and figure out what happens instead of theorizing about what might happen. So one of the things that I like to do with, today's entrepreneurs, I look at today's entrepreneurs kind of like yesterday's superheroes, the Batmans, the Robins, to some people, the Lone Ranger, And in every one of those superhero instances, what happens is that the superhero starts off with a beginning. They have an origin story. You know, something happened to them. Maybe they got bit by a spider or their parents died or something. And they decide to then use their superpower for good, which is exactly how I think entrepreneurs are. But my question to you is, before you were investing in businesses and doing all of these things with your superhero power, what was your alternate identity? Who is Michael O'Donnell?
Well, I grew up in a poor family, one of 12 children, and one of my goals growing up was not to be poor.
Good goal.
So I sort of decided that I would go to college. As it turns out, 9 of my 12 brothers and sisters did go to college, and 2 of the 3 that didn't still ended up in significant contributions to society. But I went to work in corporate America for a little bit while, but I was always an entrepreneur at heart. So I was always trying to start something else, even though I was inside corporate America. Before corporate America had intrapreneurship, which was looked down upon in the 70s and even into the 80s to some extent. Entrepreneurship now in corporate America is a little more accepted and even promoted, but back then it wasn't. So having grown up poor, got married at 19 with children, had responsibilities, so that's what sort of helped direct me to who I have ultimately become, whether good or bad.
Right. Now, did you say intrapreneurship as in I-N, not E-N?
Yeah, intrapreneurship is how we refer to the process of entrepreneurship within big corporate America. So it's called intrapreneurship. It's a known term.
Okay. I'm learning something here today, so this is good. And at the end of the day, that's what I love, is I love that I get to keep learning things. So at what point did you realize that you wanted to do something other than be the, we'll say, standard employee?
Well, I can't say that I was a standard employee very long. I helped start a company in the mid-'80s, which was sold to a Fortune 500 in the mid-'90s. And the main entrepreneur, the main shareholder left, and I stayed on and ran it for 5 years. And that business grew from $75 million a year in investments to $750 million a year in investments in the 5 years that I was there. And we established joint ventures in Great Britain, Germany, and Australia. And but the issue near the end of the century, frankly, just for me, was that I was traveling 80% of the time around the world. And it was fun because being on the board, you're sort of forced to fly first class and stay at the top hotels and all that kind of stuff. But it was also wearing on my family, and it was time to come home. In the late 90s, I started a business here in Orlando with my sons that was starting to grow, and so it was a good opportunity to jump out of that entity and back into my own company, which is what we did.
Nice. And just curious, the first companies that you've started or that you were doing, are any of those still around today?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the first one was a lease and finance company that we sold and started in 81 with a single person, and I joined it in 85. There were 4 of us. We sold it in 95, and they've been sold 2 or 3 times since, and they're a very successful operating lease entity and technology assets with that spawned businesses in London, Frankfurt, and in Sydney, Australia. The second one that we started, my sons and I started from scratch at the end of 98. We sold it at the end of 2006. And that company, somebody tried to do something different. That was also sold to a SPAC, Special Acquisition Corporation. But that entity did not stay intact because they tried to pivot too quickly into the internet business. That was a staffing business. We had 31 successful offices around the United States, but the folks that bought it wanted to turn it into an internet-based business and not a brick-and-mortar business, and that didn't work for them.
Interesting. So let me ask this. You've had, a very varied, I'll say, viewpoint from, looking at many different types of entrepreneurs. What would you say to the person considering starting a business, looking to build their cash flow? What are those necessary things, components that you've identified that go, you know what, this is something I definitely would want to be a part of? Well,
the most important thing that we see is common among successful entrepreneurs is they have a passion for whatever it is that they do. We say in the human resource business, which is what my master's degree is in, is that you first look for people that are in culture for your business. And the first thing you got to be in culture with is with yourself. So you shouldn't be doing something outside of who you are. It's very difficult to jump into something new. The second thing you got to do is you got to have talent. And talent is different than the third thing, which is skill, and I'll tell you how. When I grew up, I wanted to be a basketball player, and I wore out 2 basketballs a year, and I was 5'11", but I could not dunk, and that kept me out of the. I did play in college, but it kept me out of the pros because I didn't have talent. I had a lot of skill, but I didn't have talent. So the way it goes is culture, talent, skill, and then experience. And so the first thing all successful entrepreneurs have is they like what they're doing. They want to do it because you got to do it for 80 hours, 90 hours a week, whatever, until it gets up and running. And you got to have some natural ability to do what you're doing. You can learn the tactics and so forth on the skill level, and then as we all know, the 10,000 hours to become an expert, that just happens over time. But that's sort of the sequence that's common amongst the entrepreneurs.
Yes, and let's just be clear. We're trying not to do the 10,000 hours in 1 week, right?
Interesting TED Talk on the 10,000 hours that one guy gets up and talks about. You can learn about 70 or 80% of it in 20 hours. It's the other 9,980 that take you to be an expert.
Good point there. Now, it was culture, talent, skill, and what was the last one? Experience. If you had to, what would you say you tend to put the greatest weight upon? I mean, because not everybody starts with experience. So if they're not starting with experience, they've got a great idea. How do they overcome those obstacles?
Well, again, it goes in the order of culture, talent, skill, and experience. So first thing you want to do is something that you like doing. And if you find something that you really like to do and you have a natural ability to sort of do it, you can then learn the skills to do it, and over time get the experience to make it successful. But the first thing you got to do is be willing to put in the time and the effort and the money. And there's a whole sequence of money issues that we'll talk about, I'm sure, at some point in this conversation. But it really has to do, Jay, with having passion, and then having a way to deploy that passion into a way that can build a financial model that makes sense, because that's what you're ultimately trying to do.
Yeah.
With an idea, the sequence is this. Yeah. The sequence is you have an idea, and there's a whole bunch of steps in determining how that idea is feasible. And if it's feasible, then the idea is, can you build a business model around it? Let's talk about something that's not feasible. For example, you can build a car right now that runs on salt water. That's possible. That exists out there. The problem is it costs $1 million to build it.
Oh, is that all?
Even though it's feasible, you cannot put a business model around it because you can't financially do it.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. So you get an idea, you make sure it's feasible. There's a whole bunch of steps to do that, and then you build a financial model around it and an execution model. If you want to fly a rocket ship to the moon and you don't know how to push the buttons, you don't have the human resources to do it. Even if you got the financing, if you don't know how to do it, you can't do it. So you got a whole bunch of things that go into the model that are financial, that are human resource related, that are just generally resource related. Then the third step is to sort of get together some kind of a plan. It doesn't have to be a formal business plan, and probably shouldn't be if it's a technical business, not a big one, but some non-technical business, like, for example, if you were going to do real estate, you'd lay out exactly what you were going to do, and you'd lay out all the models and who you were going to acquire, the types of properties you were going to go after, and so forth. That's the planning portion. And the fourth issue is really to execute on it. So those are the 4 steps.
Indeed. Now, one of the things that I'm sure you've seen in your time out there working with entrepreneurs are those entrepreneurs that you would call good citizens that actually do what they're supposed to do. And then there are probably a few that you're like, not so much. What would you say are the necessary characteristics, qualities, or things that someone needs to do to be that good entrepreneur?
Well, at the organization that I started here to help entrepreneurs get funding is called the Florida Angel Nexus. And you can look at the website, floridaangelsnexus.org. But we have a model that says, do well and then do good. What that means is to not do it in the reverse order. To do it in the reverse order is entitlement. What we want to do is encourage people to create wealth and create jobs, and then have that cycle back into and through whatever ecosystem and economy that they live in, community, whatever. So, yeah, there's bad people out there, but you can't avoid that. There's also karma and all the other kinds of things that people think about or believe in or whatever.
Right.
Our tendency is to try and understand who we're going to be partners with in the financial end of it. And you can sit in front of somebody. It turns out statistically that 80% of a decision to make an investment between an angel or an angel group and an entrepreneur is how they perceive the CEO on a one-on-one basis. They perceive them to be a good person, somebody they'd like to work with, have the ability to execute, have a good plan, whatever, and a few other things, a lot of other things, actually. I'll tell you about those in a minute. Then they make an investment. If they don't, they walk away. So 80% is the ability of the CEO to communicate his value proposition and his values to whoever the investment entity is.
Wow. So you bring up an interesting topic that we've actually never discussed before. I'm sure that many people have heard of, you say angels, and we're not talking spiritual angels here. We're actually talking about people who are angel investors. So from your perspective, if you could actually kind of define how you see what that entity or person looks like and what it is that they are primarily looking for in that sense, I think that would help a number of us have greater clarity.
Well, we actually did a study on that. One of the great things about getting into academia from Pracademic was you get some resources at the university level, do some things you could never afford to do if you were on your own. So before we started the Florida Angel Nexus, we spent a year studying all of the angel groups around the country, and we had segmented the top. We wanted to get the top 40. It turned out there was a big difference between 39 and 40, so the top 39. And we asked those folks, either in person, over the phone, or by studying their websites, what does it take to be a good angel investor? And why do angels join investment groups? And why do angels be angels? So the first thing it is that they want to create a profitable and diversified portfolio. That's the number one thing that angels want to do. Because everybody doesn't want to give money away to philanthropy, and this isn't even benevolence. This is the ability to create a profitable and diversified investment portfolio. Because it turns out, as we'll talk about maybe a little bit later, that properly done angel investing is not only a valid asset class, but it's second to none in year-over-year returns over a long period of time. We talk about what those statistics are later. Second thing that people want to do is they want to connect to fresh innovations. They want to stay technologically current. They want to engage. A lot of angels are also entrepreneurs that have made some money, or corporate executives who were really entrepreneurs within their own corporations who made money and want to be part of the entrepreneurial community in the process. And they sort of get back into the business, either vicariously or actually get into it by utilizing the skills that they gained in their own experience to accelerate new ventures. And it turns out that, entrepreneurs are generally, good entrepreneurs are pretty good at being intellectually stimulating and to sit and talk with the ideas, particularly when you think about here at the University of Central Florida, which is the second largest university in the country with 64,000 students. There's a lot of bright students here. A lot of them have some pretty good ideas.
Right.
To help carve and shape those people and teach them how to network and how to learn is very rewarding. Now, we don't only deal with students here. Actually, most of the businesses we start are not student-related. They're just sort of state of Florida related. But I think the main thing, Jay, is people want to have access to opportunities for exceptional returns. Done properly in a right angel group, that can happen.
Got it. Well, you bring up two, I think, very interesting sides to this conversation. One, the concept of a valid asset class, and then secondly, exceptional returns. Everybody's got their own definition of what's exceptional, and I would love to hear your take on that, and definitely expound on this idea of a valid asset class, because some people may not have ever considered the idea of angel investing as an asset class.
Are you tired of letting good cash flow generating ideas go to waste? Go to cashflowdiary.com/ready to apply for a complimentary, yes, that means free, one-on-one breakthrough session. Take action now. Go to cashflowdiary.com/ready. Again, that's cashflowdiary.com/ready. Before we get back to today's episode of the Cashflow Diary podcast, your host, Jay Massey, has some important insights to share with you.
Okay, so I hope you guys are getting ready. I know right now we're still probably beginning to recover from the past holiday, preparing for a new year, all those types of things. That's great. And if you are that person who has said to yourself, hey, in the new year, I'd like to earn more money, I'm going to reiterate what you just heard. Go over to cashflowdiary.com/ready. We are going to be opening up the calendar here in the not too distant future for a number of people to have some one-on-one time with myself and help you guys figure out those roadblocks and kind of go through those things in a complimentary breakthrough session. So just keep that in mind. Now, as we're talking about a brand new asset class, you may not have ever considered it before. And that's kind of the whole point. Remember, Cash Flow Diary. At the end of the day, we're about cash flow. However you create it, choose to create it is up to you. We're just saying go out there and figure it out. And when things don't go all the way like you expect, that doesn't mean quit. It means continue, but in a different manner or a different way. Many of you know, we've made tons of mistakes, but making mistakes is irrelevant. It's what you do with them, learning to use them. As you have heard from entrepreneur after entrepreneur, and you will hear some more, is the secret to making it long term. And I look forward to helping everybody be longer term entrepreneurs. So let's get back, because I know you really want to hear what we have to talk about as it relates to things like the Panama Canal.
Certainly. So the way we sort of split it down here for our purposes is that we have, for example, investments in the NASDAQ and what they would generally return, the S&P 500, hedge funds, all venture capital, real estate, and then angel funds. Turns out that a study done by the Witt Bank a few years ago, but it's a published study, and also by the Kauffman Foundation did a similar study. It turns out that properly vetted angel transactions is the highest return on IRR of any asset class. Now, by the way, the numbers are 27% over a 3.5-year period of time, as opposed to the second most valid class is real estate, which returns better than 20% IRR in a well-run real estate fund, and then all venture funds, the Kleiner Perkins of the world and so forth, then hedge funds, and then, of course, the S&P 500 and the stock market and NASDAQ, which stock market has returned in the 7% range over the last 100 years or so. So that's why we see it as a valid asset class. The thing what most people don't understand is there's a difference between angel investing and what we call friends, family, and fools, which is money that you give to your nephew because he has a great idea you never heard of before, and you never see that money again, which is a big part of what people confuse with angel investing.
Right.
So, giving money to your son to buy him a job. see if you can actually make a kind of thing. So that's the difference. That's why it's an asset class. Seed funds, we call it seed funds, is the highest performing asset class according to both the Kauffman Foundation and this Witbank study that was done.
Got it. So what would success look like from the angel investor standpoint? How do you know that this one is good? What is that process, or what is that endpoint? How do you define it?
Well, I mean, we'd want to define everything in terms of IRR ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between, for example, what you do on a day-to-day basis, which I respect tremendously and participate in, by the way, and what I do on a day-to-day basis is this. In the real estate business, the sort of mantra is don't do a bad deal. Protect the downside, and the upside will take care of itself.
Yeah.
In the angel business, we have a 180-degree turn from that, and that is find the good upside deals and don't worry about the deals that don't work. So you're always looking for deals that can have tremendous market. So that if you get 2 or 3 of them right out of 10, you hit a grand slam. Whereas if you get 2 or 3 of them right out of 10, the real estate deals, you're bankrupt.
Interesting.
It's a different mentality. And the other thing that happens in angel investing that's different than most real estate deals or most other kinds of investments is this thing called the J curve. So, if you invest in a portfolio, which you have to do if you're an angel investor of 20 companies or so over a period of, say, 3 to 5 years, 20 to 30 companies, the companies that are going to fail faster than the companies that are going to succeed. So you got to have the staying power to make it through that J curve because the hockey stick doesn't take off until the bottom of the J. So,
well, I do like the name of the curve, that's for sure. However, I don't like the experience you're describing. So if someone was considering the idea of becoming said angel investor, how much does an angel investor normally start with?
Well, you got to pick something that's comfortable within your portfolio. We like to say that if you take 10 or 15% of your free cash flow and put those in angel investments, you are willing to do that over a reasonable period of time, you'll be part of that group that should end up in the highest asset class in terms of IRR. And that can be, in my angel group, we've got folks that want that number to be $250,000 over 5 years, and we got people that want that number to be $250,000 a year or higher each year. So the average angel typically will do at least 25,000 and maybe 50 to I've got folks that want to do $250,000 a year. I mean, they want that spread across 3 deals or 5 deals or something like that, but they're trying to build a diversified portfolio.
Got it. That totally makes perfect sense. Now, I've often said to individuals that nobody has a money problem, that we all have an idea problem. And a lot of what you're talking about is the vetting of other people's ideas. How do you systematize that with such variety? I mean, that's amazing to me, because at least when I'm looking at real estate, I'm like, it's going to be kind of the same. It's the idea we buy the building, people rent it out. Not overly complicated on the value proposition there. And I'm just, the amount of due diligence that you've got to do has to be staggering.
It is. And you can't do it by yourself. That's why people who try and do angel investing by themselves don't experience the kind of returns that people who either do a focused angel group, who only do one asset class, or an angel group like ourselves that has access to tremendous resources that we can go cross-platform. So, for example, it turns out that many of the successful angel groups are affiliated with research universities. And here at UCF, we are in the top 100 research universities in the country, which is you want to be in the top 100. That's a prestigious thing to do. That gives us access to some specific expertise that you can't get if you're in Podunk or wherever.
Right.
So, and then I happen to run this thing called the Venture Accelerator, which gives resources to the community to do, for example, industry analysis, market analysis, competitive analysis, those kinds of things. Students do that under a systematized methodology that I actually developed back in 2010. And that information is provided either at low cost or at no cost, depending on the student entrepreneur versus the outsider, to help people understand what the industry is doing, what the market's doing, what the competitors are doing. Now, that's just one way. The other thing that we do here at the Florida Angel Nexus is we don't invest in any transaction where we don't have an internal advocate, meaning an angel investor who knows the space and is willing to take on the lead of helping either these students or other people go through the due diligence process, which is pretty onerous. In our case, minimum 3 months, maybe as long as 4 or 5 months to get through the process to determine whether or not our group is going to make an investment.
Wow. That's wow. Okay. And then, so when you're looking at that, I guess what I want to understand more about, and I think what people would be interested in is you mentioned the Florida Angel Nexus. Is tell us a little bit more about who they are and why they exist.
Well, the reason they exist is this. My friend and I were going to actually start a fund in 2010 to fund growing businesses here in Central Florida. And we call Central Florida the Wild, Wild East because there are massive things happening here that people aren't aware of. For example, we just built here at UCF a medical school, a teaching medical school, which is very, very cool. But it's on a campus with the largest VA hospital in the world, and with the most modern technology. We also got Burnham Institute, Nemours Children's Hospital, a bunch of things going on in this thing we call Medical City. And that spurs a whole bunch of things to happen in the life sciences and industries that will come out of life sciences. At the same time, the Adventist system purchased nearly 200 acres of land in the middle of Orlando, and they're building something called Medical Village. And then here in Central Florida, we've got the Center for Photonics, and it's called Creole, which does tremendous things in the photonics world. We have the largest simulation, I think, park in the world. We have the second largest incubation system in the world for new companies. There are massive things happening in Central Florida, and we want to take advantage of that. And the way we take advantage of it is by gaining expertise on all aspects centered around the entrepreneur. They're in the center of our ecosystem. So that means you got to have resources, you got to have financing and so forth. So anyways, we wanted to build this fund and to fund angel type investments, but there weren't any angel investments because there weren't any angel groups.
Right.
So we set out with the task of forming an angel group. And what started with that study we talked about a little bit earlier.
Got it. That makes sense. Now, what would you, I guess, how does one, like, I know somebody listening right now is probably going, wow, that may mean my idea has a shot, but you guys are in Florida and they may be somewhere else. So is there a technique to uncovering and finding these angel investors? How do you work with them? All that stuff.
There's a lot of angel groups around the country. If you're in the Southeast United States, or if you're particularly in Florida, we want to talk to you. If you're not, you can Google the angel groups in your area and you'll find some. But in general, we all have, all of them are run differently. And it's like any fund or whatever, REIT or whatever you're in, they're all run differently. So, but there's some questions that are asked that are sort of normal, standard, like how committed are the entrepreneurs to their business? Angel groups don't like to fund people's hobbies. If you're in business and you're serious about it, right, that's the number one thing. And then how much of your skin do you have in the game? If you want to keep all your savings and use other people's money, that's not a good sign for investors. What's been put into the business to date and what kind of successes it has. There's a whole bunch of questions. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's a survey on the website with the top 30 questions that are important to investors. And if you were a entrepreneur and you wanted to understand how investors think, just go to our website and look up for the early stage investment opportunity assessment survey, and you'll get the questions that are important to investors.
Excellent. And what would you say in that process when you're meeting that new entrepreneur? Because I'm sure I can only imagine some of the pitches you've heard. What would you say are the top 3 mistakes that most make that you wish they would avoid?
Well, there's 2 mistakes that almost every entrepreneur makes. And the first one is that they think they've got the only idea in the world like the one they have. We have 7 billion people on this planet, and just in the United States alone, there are 5,000 universities. But I've traveled in the last year and a half to Amman, Jordan, where they have a burgeoning entrepreneurial network. So it's paid for by the state. Last week, I just got back from Colombia, where they've got a system of all the universities connected to try and spur entrepreneurship. We've done the same thing in Brazil. We have a worldwide economy now. So most people who come up with an idea don't understand that same idea in some way, shape, form, or fashion is probably being seeded somewhere else in the world. So the key is, can you execute?
Mm-hmm.
And can you execute first? And can you execute best? So part of the things that we see is people who just don't understand they're not the only game in town, which is why we do a market analysis, competitive analysis. The second thing that's common in 99.8% of all entrepreneurs that do get a business going is they just overvalue their business. They value their business post-investment instead of pre-investment, and that doesn't give the investors a chance to get the proper returns in order to get those 27% IRRs that they deserve when taking the risk that they do take in angel investments. So those are number 1 and number 2. The third thing, I guess, I'll throw this in, particularly the younger entrepreneurs. It turns out academically that 80% of the innovation comes from people under 30 years old. But more than 80% of the failures come from people under 30 years old. So, you'll be sitting in a bar with your 3 friends and decide you're going to start a business, and everybody gets 25%. It's for you, right?
Right.
And then 2 months later, one of them drops out, but now he's got 25% of the business. Now you got a capitalization problem. So that turns out to be a common problem also. I would say in more than 75% of the cases, the cap table is messed up and has to be somehow redone. Sometimes that means tanking the company. So those are the top 3. Overvaluing the company, not understanding the competition, and messed up cap tables.
Yeah, I can imagine some people are thinking right now, oh my God, I just did that. And those are the things that, you don't know what you don't know until we talk to someone like you and go, oh, wow. Which, by the way, everyone listening, that's one of the reasons why the profit analysis quadrant was created, is because I was doing very similar things like he just said, and I needed a way to describe it and understand it myself as well as to explain it to others. So with all of the things that are going on in Central Florida, I know for myself, I talk about a concept, investor identity. You want to become and serve the individuals you are most like. And typically I'm talking about that in real estate. You're talking about that as it relates towards business. And one of the pieces is always location and determining, are you in a business friendly climate and all those types of things. So I've got to ask this question for myself as well as for maybe a few others that are listening, because you're very pro Florida, and that's fine. That's great. I just need to understand why Florida from a business standpoint, because those are the things that I currently don't know.
Well, I don't have all the statistics in front of me, but I can tell you that Florida is considered one of the top 3 entrepreneurial-friendly states in the nation. The first thing is we don't have a state income tax, and that really is advantageous to a lot of people. Second thing is we are a growing economy. We're the gateway to South America, which is an increasingly commercial area for us in both directions, actually. The state university system is very well developed. We work pretty closely together. And the Florida Angel Nexus is a nexus for all of Florida. So our job at the Angel Nexus isn't to raise money; it's to raise education and capability so that all of the all the Angel groups will work together. In Orlando, we have this thing called Fanlando. But in, for example, Gainesville, there's a thing called the Institute for the Commercialization of Public Research, which is a statewide organization based there. And there's different things like that all over the state. So the state's a growing state, and it's been recognized in many or most or every study as one of the top places to start a business if you want to start one.
Got it. And, when you mentioned South America, something just kind of hit me, and I was just wondering if this was even on your radar, or does it matter to you guys on that side with the whole Panama Canal expansion, etc. In your world, do you see that playing in any way an impact to the entrepreneurial community over there?
Oh, it's going to be huge. I mean, I just flew through Panama on my way to Cali, Colombia a week ago yesterday, and they, of course, have widened the canal and deepened it, and they're doing the same thing to the ports here in Florida. So the ports are being facilitated to handle these large ships, which is the reason why they widened the Panama Canal. So, and of course those ships are going to come here, and then those things are going to get unloaded, put in trains and so forth, and be distributed around the country east of the Mississippi. So yes, that's a great question, and yes, the impact on Florida is huge, and a lot of investment is being made to handle that impact.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking that, and that's kind of the thing that I play off of is the where the job's going to be. And if you're telling me that the entrepreneurs are going to be in Florida, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, there's probably going to be businesses created to help that particular place. And guess what? All of those people and those businesses need a place to stay. And now you got my attention. I'm like, okay, when all those jobs come there, people are going to want to be there. You're telling me there's no state income tax. I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. And more, no state income tax, more jobs. That's a very, very good combination as well. And I was just kind of curious if something like that was even on your radar, but I had a feeling it was. But I wasn't sure. And I just wanted to get some clarity, for myself to some degree, but also for others so that they can hear the process and the cascading effect that some of the things that we're hearing in the news are very, very relevant to the plans that we should be making at the end of the day. Now, when it comes to, your favorite types, because I'm curious, because we've got to hear this. Well, what would you say have been your spectacular failure and then your overwhelming success when it comes to your track record and what you've done, and how did you handle both of those?
Well, the most spectacular failures that I've had is failure to act. For example, back in about 1998 or 1999, I was invited to St. Petersburg, Florida, and offered the second franchise in a system called pods. At that point, they only had 100 pods built, and I went to the plant, and they were still trying to figure out really how to build an effective pod. And the long and the short of it is I did not make that investment because my partners at the time didn't want to do it. And that was a huge mistake, and I got a couple of examples of that. So I always say my biggest failure is failure not to do something. And actually my biggest financial failure was investing in a company in about 1996 or 97. At the time it was called Toops Technology. Leon Toops was a great friend of mine, and we went to Rome together. His son was ordained in Rome, and our families went to that ordination, and he asked me to loan him $100,000 back in that time frame because he had to meet payroll on Monday. And long and short of it is I lost that money, and I've never regretted losing that money because I know it was in his heart to do the right thing, and he just couldn't make that company go. So losing money is not a good thing, but not making money, not making investments where you should make investments are the things that it really hit at my craw.
Yes. Wow. Pods, huh? Okay. And what would you say has been some of those, those overwhelming successes? Did you, first of all, typically, did you know that going in? Did you think it had the potential, or was it well, maybe kinda? And what was that process like?
Well, in the case of pods, I wanted to do the deal because the assets were long-lasting assets, and I figured worst-case scenario, you got a 15-year, 20-year asset that is renting for $100 a month. I'd figure out what to do with them if the company went belly up. But so I wanted to do that deal in the worst way, but I needed more capital than I was willing to take out of my own family trust to do that. And again, we had 3 people in the investment company, and the other 2 didn't want to do it. So my gut told me it was going to work, and it obviously did work. I mean, they sold for $495 million or something like that in the last 3 or 4 years. Hooters. When I moved to Florida in 1986, one of the 5 or 6 owners of Hooters lived across the street from me. And I said to the guy, I think his name was Gil, I said, "Are you guys ever going to franchise this thing?" He goes, No, we're never going to franchise it. We're only going to have company-owned stores. At the time, they had 6 stores. I said, if you ever decide to franchise it, let me know. I mean, I like Pretty Women, and I also like chicken wings. So let me know if you're going to franchise it. He moved about 3 or 4 months later. Next thing I read, 18 months later in the paper, they sold the whole franchise rights to some guy in Atlanta.
Wow.
And when they sold Hooters, the franchisee made all the money. Those guys made $50 million or something, but the franchisee made $450 million. So again, the deals I didn't do are the ones I regret. The ones I did do, you lose some, you win some. We've had some good wins.
Awesome. That's good to hear. Now, as a final type of closing comment, if you can think back and remember back to those early days, or working with, entrepreneurs who are maybe a little timid, maybe wondering, what would you say to that person who wants to get started, believes they've got something great and could make it happen, but they just need a little push? What would you say to that person?
I say that the number one thing that entrepreneurs have to have, assuming they have the passion for what they're doing, is they need to find a good mentor or some good mentors who will buy into their passion, spend some time with them, connect them with their networks, whether it's financial networks to market their products or whatever. Mentorship is a very big thing. In fact, here at the university, we have an entire we have one person dedicated to doing nothing except finding mentors for local companies around the state. So getting a good mentor, I think, is just critical.
Absolutely. And for those that have listened and wish to, probably find that survey, the early stage survey, what is the best way for them to be able to track you guys down and maybe take that survey, and what does that process look like?
Well, we'll go onto our website, floridaangelnexus.org or .com, either one comes up. Florida Angel Nexus, all one word. And all the information you need is on there. And then, of course, if it's something that you can't find that you want, you just send us an email and somebody will get back to you.
Excellent. Well, I definitely appreciate you taking the time to invest here with the Cashflow Diary audience. I know that I've learned a lot today, and I believe they have as well.
Thank you, Jay. Pleasure to be with you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean today? It probably means if you've got an idea that you're wondering about and you're in the Central Florida or Southeast area, you need to get it over there. And if not, then you need to find an angel network and get something started. Build your cash flow, because if it just stays in your head, it doesn't ever come out to provide value. There are people out there who are looking for your idea. And you just got to go connect with them and let them know that you exist. It's been fun talking to you guys one more time. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.